Let's talk about what the U.S. options are here. The president has said everything except for boots on the ground still on the table. Yeah. There's been talk about airstrikes, but he's also said that Maliki has to be part of the solution here. What's the U.S. going to do here? Do we need Maliki to move aside, or what's the play?
Well, there are no good options. I mean, that's the reality, and this is sort of the worst of all national security problems, because you go from bad to worse in terms of your options. And you also have different problems here. You've got the immediate problem of a terrorist organization, the successors to Al-Qaeda in Iraq, controlling vast swaths of the Middle East and resources. And so you've got to stop their advance, and you've got to roll them back. So that's one immediate problem. How do you do that? You then have the political problem of Iraq itself. Can it remain a viable, unified state? Can the politics work? That's a separate problem. Then you've got the problem of Syria, which infects all of this, because ISIS is not just a problem of Iraq, but it's a problem in Syria. And so the problem of what happens next in Syria is also part of this question. And so it's not just that we have very limited options with respect to the immediate problem, is that these problems are layered on top of each other. And how do you then distinguish between short, medium, and long-term solutions? That's very difficult, and especially when we don't have I'm going to say this, we don't have a footprint in Iraq to be able to influence as much as we once did.
Now, the Iranians say they're going to help. They're already there in some capacity. The Quds forces and their leaders, they're ready to move. This puts us in a situation of having to choose here. Do we partner with Iran, an enemy on many fronts, because we're fighting against the Al-Qaeda-linked group? What do we do?
Well, this complicates the immediate response and the diplomacy. Presents perhaps an opportunity to talk to Iran, but certainly doesn't present an opportunity for us to lock arms with the Revolutionary Guard and to fight on the ground with them. So you're not going to have U.S. air power sort of complementing Iranian ground forces.
Are we sure?
Well, I think the U.S. has said that that's probably not in the cards, and I don't think it's either politically palatable or even operationally doable. So I don't think you're going to see that. But it does complicate the diplomacy, because we do have short-term interests in common. We both support the Maliki government, the central government in Baghdad. They from a Shia perspective, we from a purpose of national unity. We also have a common enemy. These violent Sunni extremist groups are common enemies of ours. But that's really where the interests end, because long-term we have very different interests. And the complication of Iran's injection into this directly is it stokes the sectarian dimensions of the conflict in the way that we've described. It also complicates the diplomacy, because the Saudis, the Emiratis, even the Turks, who are important to the solution long-term and what happens in the region, are going to be incredibly suspicious of what happens with Iran. And if it looks like the U.S. is cozying up to Iran on this, as well as the nuclear discussions, you're going to start to lose confidence of the Sunni Arab allies that you need to be part of a long-term solution in the region. So the involvement of Iran may look like an interesting sort of near-term solution, but it creates all sorts of policy complications and diplomatic headaches.
We've got to wrap it up, but if you're in the White House, on a scale of 1 to 10, as a foreign policy crisis, where's this?
This is a 9, because you have the immediacy of terrorist groups gaining momentum, territory, resources. That presents threats to our friends and allies, presents threats to the U.S. homeland. You've got the complication of a state that we have invested blood and treasure in literally falling apart. You know, who's going to put Humpty Dumpty back together again? And you have on top of that the problem of Syria, the festering conflict that there seems to be no solution for, that is feeding what's happening in Iraq. And so this is a multiple layered crisis that the White House has to figure out some solution to.
It's a subject we'll come back to many times. Juan, thanks as always.
Thank you, Bob.
And thanks to you for watching Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. We'll see you next time.